At the root of every sale that has been lost, at the foundation of that is something called psychological reactants. I talk about it quite a bit in my videos. However, today I want to go deep on it. When I think about this, I say to myself, okay, I know I drop this from time to time, but unless somebody really understands what it is that elicits this reactance from prospects, maybe they can't get better. And so I want to really focus on that today. Because again, it is at the foundation of every single sale that is lost in any industry, certainly in real estate. It is this reactance that causes prospects to push back on you, right? So we're going to get into it. So I want to do an exercise first, all right? I want you to experience reactance, and I'm going to, on purpose, elicit that reactance from you. And I want you to see what happens here. If you just close your eyes for a second, and I ask you not to picture your car. Don't think about your car. Don't think about the interior. Don't think about the wheels. Don't think about the color of your car. Don't think about your car at all. The entire time you're what? Thinking about your car. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that is psychological reactance at work. What is happening is this. When somebody is telling you to do something, it is a reflex in us to do essentially the opposite. Psychological reactance says that when we feel as though our own freedom to make our own decisions, our own choices, our autonomy of choice is at risk, that it is in our DNA to push back on that. And that is psychological reactance. When I tell you to do something, whether you agree with it or not, and quite frankly, even if you know it's in your best interest, it's just a reflex that's built in for us to back. This shows up every single selling environments. And so I want to talk through this. So what happens is most prospects that we talk to in real estate sales are what we call ambivalent. And simply put, that means that the prospect inside of their own mind, they have an argument for why they should do something. And in this context, we'll talk about selling a house. Okay. So this is in real estate sales. And so prospects that are ambivalent have an argument inside of their mind that could go either way, right? Depending on the situation. When they're talking to real estate agents, they have an argument for selling, they have an argument against selling, they have an argument for meeting with you, they have an argument against meeting with you, they've got an argument for selling on their own, they've got an argument for listing it with you. Okay, that's the context. That's what we mean by ambivalent. They can kind of go either way. And depending on how you handle the conversation, this is why I always say we have a massive responsibility on how prospects respond to us. This has to do with our skills. That's why it's so critical for us to work on sales skills. So depending on how we handle that conversation will determine how much reactance we elicit from the prospect. And if we do it wrong and the reactance is too high, this is when you don't get the lead. This is when you don't set the appointment. This is when you don't close the sale. So what we want to do is look at this and say, okay, if I am the one that is responsible for how the prospect responds, the second that I go down the path of trying to give the person advice, make the recommendation, tell the person what I want to do, in other words, put their autonomy at risk, that will immediately trigger reactance. So I can't do that. So we have to support their autonomy, because prospects don't believe what we say. Nope. And the reason for that is because there is a perceived bias that what we say or what we tell the prospect, that we're only doing that or saying that because we are the beneficiary of that, because we're salespeople, and of course we make commission. So when we make a recommendation, or when we suggest something, or when we give the prospect advice, it comes across bias, because the prospect says, well, of course you would say that because you have a benefit or you have an interest in making a sale. That by itself is the thing that is causing reactance to happen or take place. So what we have to do is elicit what we call change talk, or what psychologists have found and they call change talk. This means that not only do prospects not believe what we tell them, they rarely believe what other people tell them, but they always believe what they tell themselves. And so this has to do with people talking themselves in or out of things. And that is what you want to get great at if you're going to be a great salesperson. So how do we do that? Well, there's two things at play in every sale. If you think about all sales is simply having somebody change from from what they're doing today, the status quo, into change, right? And it doesn't matter what you're selling, all sales is change. It's somebody, or it is somebody changing. And so the two things at play is that person deciding to change or deciding to stay the same, to keep things status quo. These are the two things at play. Now, what most traditional sales methodology has taught all of us is that we being the salesperson, make the argument for change. And it's because we believe that that is what it means to serve the prospect. Listen, the prospect has this pain, they've got this problem, this is what they want to do. My product or service helps them accomplish that. So I'm going to recommend that they buy my product or they hire me for my service. And we are the one that makes the argument for that change to occur. Now, here's what happens. Just like we talked about, when we are the ones who are telling people what to do, that elicits that reactance, right? So as we pull the prospect in closer, Mr. Prospect, here's what I think you should do. And you start to pull the prospect towards you, making the argument for change. At the very moment we put the prospect in the position to make the argument for the status quo, and then they start to pull back. That's that tug of war, or that's the thumb war between salesperson and prospect. They go back and forth. It's like a game of tug of war. They're pulling on each other. Hey, you should do this. Prospect says, no, I shouldn't. Here's why I think you should do this. This is all traditional objection handling, sales training. Here's why you should. Here's why I shouldn't. It's this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So there's a different way that you might find that works better. And so this would be a pushing technique. So instead of trying to pull the prospect towards you and the prospect's pulling away from you, what we want to do is gently push the prospect away by making the argument for the status quo so that the prospect then defends the change. I'm hoping that you're with me and you caught that. So let me give you an example. All right. So let's take a for sale by owner as an example. And this is for all the real estate agents. And you're talking to the for sale by owner. For sale by owner says, listen, I'm not interested in listing my house. Rather, I'm going to sell this house on my own. To which most realtors have been trained to respond to that objection by trying to come up with some fancy words and convince the for sale by owner why listing with them is a better idea than selling on their own. And so they try to use all these fancy scripts that rarely ever work. Hey, this is why you should do this. This is why you should do that. Prospect says, no, did you not hear me? I'm not interested. I'm not interested. Click. They hang up. They get nowhere. And that's why most agents don't have a lot of success with for sale by owners. Well, that would be because we're making the argument for change. Hey, you're doing this thing. We think you should list it with a realtor. That's a change, right? So we're the champion of that change. Well, when that happens, prospects push back on us. We know that. So what do we have to do instead? We have to make the argument for the prospect to stay the same so the prospect can think about arguments on why they would change. And here's what you would do. So with that same example with the for sale by owner that's looking to sell on their own, this could also be used as a pattern interrupt. You say, Mr. Prospect, I think it makes a lot of sense for you to sell on your own. Why not? If you can't sell this, listen, a lot of houses right now, they're selling within about 30 days. You know, if you can't sell within 30 days or 45 days, what would be the reason you might look to interview a realtor? Now, what have we done? Now the prospect, we put the prospect in the position to make the argument themselves using their own words for the change, not us. Because as soon as we do it, we elicit that reactance and they pull back, they retract, they resist. But when we ask a question like that, now the prospect says, well, we can't sell this in 45 days, then yeah, I mean, I think that at that point probably makes sense to hire a professional to come here and get the job done because they might have more ways to market the property than we know how, or they might have better access to different buyers. You see, now the prospect starts to verbalize what we call change talk. It's their idea. They're the ones doing the selling, to which we then simply just need to respond with, well, how long do you think you might try and sell your home before you think it would make sense for us to meet and talk about some of those other options? Well, you know, probably about 30 days. Got it. And now you're just complying with their own wishes. It wasn't you trying to pressure them into doing something. It was their own ideas that you're just complying with. So I know that that concept can be, you get it? Maybe you don't. We're going to continue to talk about it here on the channel, but it is my hope that it did make sense. And you just want to think about, okay, if I push somebody, then I'm forcing them, or rather, if I pull somebody towards me, naturally to get away from me, they have to pull back. That's that whole tug of war. That is what most sales methodology looks like. And what I am suggesting that you try is that you push prospects away. Some will retreat. Some will retract because because you're offering them an opportunity to say no, which is what you want. What we're looking for are the prospects who push back. When we say, hey, why don't you do something that is not in our best interest, and you get the prospect to argue back with you why they should work with you, that is where we're trying to land.